All right, Krista and Lindsey, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us. We're pumped.
So glad to be here. I feel like we could have talked before forever. So I'm excited to just continue our conversation.
For real, me too. And I would love to start with because both of you have had such an interesting journey, and I was diving into your lives and sort of just looking at your journey and how you went one way and then all of a sudden a super different way and kind of all those things. And I would just be curious if you could both start by sharing just a little bit of your background. Like, what was life like as you were little Krista and little Lindsey running around as kids?
I know we look at each other, we're like, how was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I love that question. I grew up on the East Coast in Pennsylvania. I'm the oldest of four kids. And I was a little performer. So I just loved to
Yeah.
create little dramatics anywhere I went. Whether it was just like singing when no one asked me to sing or putting on plays with my imaginary friends. I just always felt really inspired to be like transmuting whatever creativity was coming through me in a physical way and an audible way.
Yeah.
And yeah, that has really stayed with me in terms of what I'm always driven by and passionate about, which is self-expression. And it's definitely evolved over the years. I went to like an all girls private Catholic school where
Nice.
I was focused in theater. I also focused on theater in college. And then when I got to New York, I was like, I want to be a Broadway star after
Right.
college. And man, it's so fulfilling and really difficult to be like going to 5, 6 auditions in a day, trying to pay rent in New York, bartending at night, and just not having the energy to really do it all.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was, a turn of many events. I eventually, this is a very truncated version of the story, but I
Yeah.
eventually found Soul Cycle. And
Right.
yeah, and that was just an kind of a different version of
Performing.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
performing. And that's kind of like what I found myself to do throughout my life, where it's just like there is that common thread of being able to be creative and perform and, throw myself into new projects, which is, exactly what the podcast was. And
Yeah.
we'll get into that story. But yeah, I was just always really wanting to create in the doing, I guess. The product of it wasn't always like top of mind for me. I was like, I just want to do it. I just want to create. I just want to
Yeah.
be in the process. And that really, really filled me up. And I had really supportive parents.
Yeah.
They were always encouraging me to do what I loved to do.
Yeah.
um, they didn't exactly like agree with every which way that I did it. Bartending at night and doing all those things to make it happen didn't necessarily make them like the happiest, but
Yeah.
you just do what you got to do.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you were a kid, was there like a moment you have a memory of like, oh my God, that's what I'm gonna do for my life is be a performer? Like, is there a moment that pops into your head like that? Or like was there a movie you watched? Was there, what was that? You're shaking your head, so
Yeah.
I'm assuming yeah.
Yeah. I was in 8th grade and I was cast as Peter in Peter Pan.
Let's
And
go.
I had to like cut my hair. They brought people in from Las Vegas to like fly us and do all these fancy things. And
What?
I really fully immersed myself in that role.
Hmm.
And I just proved to myself like the ways in which I can fine tune my craft, where the hard work, the dedication can produce something that just not only fills me up but also fills other people up.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments where like my theater director, was a mentor of mine, just like took a chance on me.
Yeah.
And yeah, that really was a turning point, and where I was like, I want to do this
Yeah.
forever. Yeah.
That's cool. All right, Krista, how about yourself? What was little Krista doing as a kid?
Little Krista, I was a little rebel. I was kind of a rebel, and I was kind
Yeah.
of like a questioner. I was always like questioning everything. And I was always someone that wanted to be really deep. Like I always remember it bothered me that everyone just had small talk, and
Huh.
I always wanted to have really deep, meaningful conversations with people. And that, led me to always wanting more from life, but always feeling like unfulfilled with what was going on where I grew up in Ohio. So I grew up in a small town, and people were
What part?
not Cincinnati.
Okay, my family's from Canton, so
Oh,
not too far.
not too far, but you get it. Cut from the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
cloth.
yeah,
We
yeah.
get the vibe.
Great
The vi-
corn.
great corn. It's great sports state, and just, great place to grow up.
Yeah.
But people there, it's sad. I never felt like people allowed themselves to dream, or people really
Oh,
allowed
God.
themselves to feel or express. So I was this person that was really rebellious and really expressive and a real feeler. So it was something that made me really unhappy, for most of my life, until I was able to figure out how to channel it when, I almost graduated college, and I got in the corporate world, and I would always have side projects and side hustles. I had a blog, and I started a travel company out of Morocco, and then eventually the
Nice.
podcast. But really, most of my life was just kind of going along the path that people thought was meant for me, but always doing things in my own sort of rebellious and truth seeking way.
What do you think is the importance of like letting your light shine through? Because it sounds like for a while you were sort of mom and dad maybe said I wanted to do or I should do this thing, and then eventually one day you're like, F this. This is my life. I'm gonna step into my full being. Like, what do you think is the importance of doing that?
Yeah, I've been obsessed with this fact lately, but our prefrontal cortex, which is where our consciousness lies, and really the differentiator between ourselves and like the life that we've been programmed to live, comes online when we're 25. So I really
Huh.
do feel like when I was 25 or in my 20s, my early 20s, I had the realization that like this was my life and I should be living it in
Yeah.
the way that makes me the most happy versus the way society programs us, or our parents program us, or our friends program us. And what took me to understand the importance of my light was being in really dark places, being someone that struggled with mental illness in my family and in my experience most of my life. I realized that if I was going to be unhappy being this way, I should at least try another way. So I really saw through that the light was important, and then also to always exploring things in spirituality. My understanding of my light is through my spiritual awakening, and that's how I came to that.
Yeah. That's crazy. So it's like scientific that
Hmm.
something happens in your brain where around your mid 20s you're like, life
Yes.
check.
Yes, that's why they call it like a early, like 20s. They call it like crisis of your 20s, and then
Yeah.
and when you're 27 to 30, you have a Saturn return, which is basically, it's astrological, so we love that, but it's really where Saturn comes back to the same place that it was when you were born. And the planet Saturn is one that is of tough decisions, and it really asks people to get serious and think about the way they've been living their life. Do they like their relationships? Do they like their job? Do they like the way they're showing up? And if you do, then those 3 years will be really pleasant and amazing. But if you don't, those will be really hard. So usually the years from 27 to early 30s are really transformational for folks, whether it's really good or really bad.
I love that. I love the like science behind that. That's so cool. I'm
That's it. That's it. That's where it ends, pretty much. So
yeah, and that's the
there we go.
episode.
Don't press further.
Yeah. So I'm curious what both of your thoughts are on having somewhat like of a loose grip, I guess you could say, on figuring out
Everything.
your life. Yeah, because and I've heard it through both of your stories, and even in my own, I feel like I've had so many moments where I'm like, this is exactly what I want to do. And then you have one conversation or one moment happens and you say yes, and all of a sudden 2 years later, you're like, how am I even waking up and this is what I do? So I'm just curious, Chris, I know you especially with sort of Soul Cycle, that was a big vision. But for both of you, I'd be curious, what do you think is the importance of sort of just like letting go and letting what's supposed to happen?
Yeah, I definitely think it's necessary. And I think having a focus is important though. Early on in the podcast, we talked a lot about being fierce and flexible,
I
because I
love it.
think you can have you can have a clear vision, but really feeling into how does that vision make you feel and what parts of that vision really excite you. And the smaller details of it might show up a little bit differently. That's why, I feel like that's been the case my entire life where, I work for something and or I ask for something or try to manifest something, and I usually end up laughing a little bit because it's like even with the podcast showing up, it just shows up in like a different suit. You're like, oh, wow. Like, I
Yeah.
really wanted to do something where I am not working for a company. And here I am. I didn't know it would be a podcast. I didn't even listen to podcasts. I
Yeah.
didn't really know what a podcast was before we started. And so I think that's so important because there's something that we've observed just within our demographic and even within our community where people can have these really specific goals, which I think is great and healthy. And
Yeah.
then when it doesn't turn out that way, there is this disappointment that overrides the pivot and the next step.
Yeah.
And I just think it's it can be a really heavy energy that could block people from maybe seeing clearly that, wow, like this showed up because I'm supposed to meet Krista, or this showed up because I'm supposed to learn how to speak on a microphone, all
Mm.
of these things. So I think being focused and flexible, fierce and flexible is definitely important.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
One of the big things Tony says is it's like we as humans, we move towards pain or we move away from pleasure. And the one that is stronger is moving away from pain. And like he gives a silly example. It's like imagine you're having sex with the person you love and someone's like breaking in your door with a chainsaw. You're going to run to figure that out first, right? The pain, because that's avoiding death rather than the pleasure. So I think what you're saying is it's like even if you're focused on something and a small little thing happens that you can look at that takes you towards pain or away from pain, like you're going to hyper focus on that rather than, well, maybe if this was something beautiful that happened in your life, that could be a way that life's happening for you, not to you.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah.
I think
Krista, yeah,
we
yeah,
realized that both. I was going to say with our jobs, it's like I was in, again, I was in the corporate world. I was doing finance, management, consulting to digital marketing to events, and I was really unhappy. I was successful, I was making good money, and I was finding these jobs, but I was just deeply unfulfilled. I never felt like I had a point or purpose when I was doing it.
yeah,
But I look back now and I really see clearly how important those jobs were for building our business. And the same for Lindsay. All of her roles up until this point really created this perfect unity for us
yeah,
and what we're doing. And if I would have known during those times, like it's really important that you learn how to have email etiquette. It's really important that you
yeah.
learn how to run events. It's really important that you learn how to structure a client relationship. All these
Yeah.
silly things that I really, really took for granted that have profoundly transformed our business for both, Lindsay and I.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. So what I would be curious is 380 episodes. We were talking about it before. Um, just a wealth of knowledge and conversations and deep places. I'm sure you've gone with a lot of different people. I'm curious, what are some of the top things you have seen and takeaways you've got on how someone can figure out what their purpose is and how someone can go from that place of feeling lost and stuck to shifting to a place where, they're feeling excited about what they're doing with their life.
Yeah, I think what I've noticed the most, and I think I experienced the most in my life, was focusing less on my purpose and what I wanted to do with my life, and first focusing on the inner work that I needed to do. So
Mm,
I was really fierce about my personal work and spiritual work that I had to do, and then my purpose really was birthed out of that. It's my expression of me being in alignment. So when we have these people on our shows that have either found their purpose or are talking about it, they're really focused on being the best version of themselves. So that's getting good sleep, nourishing their
mm,
body, checking in on their relationships, having a spiritual practice, having a personal growth and development practice. And through that, you become this like aligned version of yourself that will attract or have the wherewithal to have clarity and create
right.
the life that you want to live. But all of us could really focus on that personal growth work, spiritual work, whatever, what have you, through the time that we are looking for our purpose. So I really think that that's the number one thing that people should really focus on,
Mm,
because that they can control, and then everything else will follow.
right. So in a sense, stop looking externally on like everything and just work internal
Yes.
and the things will come
Yes.
into your life as they're supposed to. I love
Everything,
it.
whether it's love, like
Yeah.
friendships, relationships, it's been, for me, I've seen when I do the work, like this year has been so beautiful to see my friendships, the way that my friendships have evolved as I've done the work on my friendships and the relationships I had with women. When I focused it on relationships is when I found my fiance. When I focused it
Yeah.
on, my worth and my power is when I manifested my career. So if we focus on these areas and really becoming our best selves in those, the world will change or show up differently for us.
I love that.
I remember a conversation we had with Angela Manuel Davis, and she spoke about purpose. We are born on purpose, in purpose, and for purpose.
Hmm.
And she was speaking more specifically just about, being created by God, who, like, you are truly born in his likeness and in that perfect way. And I think for me, that just really landed because one, I do feel like as I evolve, like I kind of feel my purpose showing itself, revealing itself a little bit more. And it also can evolve and kind of like shift and show me different facets of what it is and what it
Yeah.
wants to become. But just knowing that like I am the purpose too is like really powerful. I think people
Yeah.
separate ourselves from our purpose. We're like, but I haven't found my purpose. And it's like, wait, like you are the purpose. Like you
Dang, that
truly
gives me
are the
goosebumps.
purpose. And to Krista's point, it's like really, being in touch with and just in awe of like your life, who you are, who you're becoming, like your faults and the powerful parts of you, like just all aspects of you. I think the more that you can love those parts of you, as cheesy as that sounds, like
Yeah, it's
I
true though.
think you can truly connect with the core of what your purpose is.
Yeah. I think an incredible thing someone once told me, and the guy who told it to me was Tony Robbins, of course. Uh,
Who's that again?
but
Yeah.
but for me, like I'm sure both of you had a point in your life where it was a strong pain of like, what's my purpose? That's part of the reason I'm sure Almost started in the podcast that you guys have now that is impacting millions of lives all over the world. Is it's like once you go into a place so deep of why am I here? What's my purpose? You become on a massive purpose and passion to solve that question and to help other people get out of that place of pain. And one of the things Tony shared with me that just brought a sense of like relief is what if you had more than one purpose? And it's like, what if you could look at your life and maybe your purpose today was to be the best lover that you've ever been to your boyfriend or girlfriend? And like that was your purpose in the day. And what if your purpose tomorrow was when you show up to work to be the best person you could and to make someone else smile there that day? Right. And it's like you always have maybe some people's purpose is part of your purpose is you're a mother, you're a father. Right. But it's like, what if we didn't just have one purpose in this world, but we actually just had a multiple amount of purposes?
Love that.
Yeah.
And then it's like the presence. So it's like your purpose is presence because
It,
really you have to be present to whatever is needed in that moment and how you
yeah.
can show up best. And I think about that a lot too. And I think that's such a beautiful point where it's like our purpose can be as simple as smiling at everyone we see in a
Yeah.
day or giving someone like a long hug or like it doesn't need to be so profound where we're like, my purpose is impacting millions of people all over the world. It's like our purposes can be like, I'm going to be a great mother, the best mother I can be. And I think we complicate them because of social media and because of there's so much comparison. And especially for people that are coming out of college to feel like their purpose has to be like
Huge.
exponential and huge. And it doesn't. It really needs to be, it could be as small as like those tiny moments of presence.
Yeah, there's a quick story that's kind of popping into my heart that changed like you said, like some days your purpose could be to add a smile to someone else's face. And kind of a little bit about my background. I used to be this shy, quiet kid. And like I was like, I'm never gonna talk to a stranger. That's the scariest thing in the world. But I had a friend and he was the most charismatic social person. Like you'd walk around with him and you'd be like, Jesus, he's like talking to this other random person. But he shared a story with me and you're just reminding me of it. It was this story of this kid that he was in high school and basically was just like a kid that got bullied all the time. And, every single day he was kind of just like, man, this is like, this sucks. Like, this is my life, but whatever. And so one day he's like walking home, he's got all his books in his hand and he's walking back to his house. And of course, the bullies come, knock the books all over the floor. And he's just like, yep, here it is again. Like, this is my life. And this like jock person came over, helped him pick up the books. And as he helped him pick up the books, they were like, oh, we're both walking the same way. Well, let's like, let's walk while we go home. And they started walking when they went home. They ended up becoming really good friends. They ended up becoming best friends. And I think it was 10 years later, they were at the jock's wedding, and the kid that got bullied was his best man. And he was given his best man speech. And he said, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because the day you helped me that day, I was going home to kill myself. And it's like, you never know how just like having a conversation with a random person in a grocery store or on the sidewalk, or like just saying, thank you so much, have an incredible day. Like, you could literally save someone's life. And like, what if that was just your purpose? And it's like, just like you're saying, it starts with being present and really knowing that even the small little purposes you have are massive purposes that you have.
That's beautiful. Wow.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it's it just came to my heart from both of you. So one thing that I would be curious to kind of shift past a little bit is obviously something that I think shows up in your 20s is people go from this place of, all right, I got out of school, or I didn't go to school, but I'm in this job and I've been here a couple of years, and maybe facing that sort of little voice in your head that goes, is this really what you want to do? Like, are you actually happy here? And so I would be curious, like, what would both of your thoughts be on how do you go through that place of being somewhere, knowing that you don't really want to be there, but it's comfortable there, so you're staying there?
Yeah, I'll speak to it from more of like a personal relationship perspective.
Yeah.
When I graduated from college, I had been dating my long-term boyfriend for a few years. He was a couple years older than me, and I thought he was the one, which I can imagine there are a lot of people out there who are with a college sweetheart, and perhaps they are the one, or maybe not.
Yeah.
And I really thought he was the one. And I was getting these like little taps from my soul that were like, hey, like, this isn't really feeling good anymore, and this is not for you, and you're dimming your light. And there's just so many things that were happening within the relationship that yeah, just weren't great.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the tools or the ability or even the motivation to communicate that with him. I mean, we're freaking 24, 23, 24, so we weren't really, or I wasn't really brought up with those types of tools. So my soul kept like knocking at the door, and then started to like break down the door, and I still wasn't listening because it was comfortable. I'm like, this is really, I know him so well. Like, what am I going to do? What am I going to start dating again? Like, how do I do that? Like find that person.
You're like 23.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So funny.
Yeah. Like, how am I going to do that? I want to be married by the time I'm 26. Yeah, like, we don't have time.
Like, what am I going to do? Date again?
And yeah, so then it just got so painful, and I just blew that shit up. I cheated on him, and it wasn't just like a one-time thing. It was kind of like an emotional and physical cheating with one person, and it was like a dark time. It was really dark. I think I like went out of body, where I was like, I'm doing this, and would I have done it differently? For sure. Definitely. But I also knew that this was the thing that was going to break up the relationship, and I was going to move on. And as painful as it was, I'm really grateful. He's super happy and well. And I wouldn't be in LA if I hadn't broken up with him. There's so many things that wouldn't have happened. But yeah, the relationship piece is a romantic relationship can be so comfortable, can be that home that you're like, well, like, we'll just try to make it work. And of course, try. But if you keep getting those pings that's like, oh, it's not right, have the conversation or like leave. You really have to listen to that intuition, as hard as it can be.
Yeah, I think, and for the job thing, I think it's really important that people bring like conscious awareness to their day. And what I did is I would journal. So I would take a few words and I would just write down a feeling for the day. And then I was able to really look back and track, like, it's fine. I'm comfortable. I'm all these things. And when you really have conscious awareness to how you're feeling each day, you can see, like, oh, actually, it's been 3 weeks where I've been really unhappy and miserable.
Mm,
And I think people are so used to this low level depression, anxiety, uncomfortable, or sadness more so
yeah.
feeling all the time that they think it's normal. It's like this normalized pacification that we have, that I think if people were aware of consciously by looking at their own journal or by looking at a book that would see, like, oh, I've been this unhappy for a year, it would be really helpful for them and maybe motivate them
Yeah.
to move forward. In addition to that, it's always writing down too, like, what you're looking for. If people don't have clarity on what they're looking for, they're going to continue getting what they have. So
Yeah.
I think people are always like, I don't like my job or whatever, but then they really haven't allowed themselves, haven't given permission to dreaming and thinking about what they want in the future. And you can't call that next thing in unless you're, clear about what it is that you want.
Right. Love it. Okay, cool. So let's go back, let's say, into both of your 20s. And let's say you could take yourself right now and all the conversations you've had, all the life experience you've had, that you've been through. What's like a piece of advice that you would go tell yourself in that place of being lost and stuck that could help you with some guiding advice? Like, what's something you would go back and tell yourself in your 20s, like, hey, if all you got to know is this, what would that be?
Mm.
For me, it would be you can tell people how you feel. You can tell people the truth and they
Mm,
won't run away, and it will actually strengthen and deepen your relationship and give them permission to tell the truth and be themselves. I spent a lot of time morphing myself and crafting what I was going to say because I thought it was what the other person needed to hear
mm,
in order to be safe or comfortable. Um, and that was at the expense of my own feelings and emotions and needs and desires. So yeah, that's what I would say.
awesome.
I think I would just let myself know and reaffirm that, like, if I want a life that looks different than everyone I know, then I have to do things that look different than everyone I know.
Hmm.
And I think I felt so much shame for moving to different cities, to doing different jobs, to changing friend groups, to changing who I was, that it just took me longer to settle into the fact of I have a different life than everyone else. I have different goals than everyone else. I have, like, such a beautiful experience that I'm in right now. And all of that is because I made decisions that were different than everyone around me.
Yeah,
So I think really just giving myself permission to change my mind and evolve more so than I was at the time.
I love it. So cool. Okay, so we didn't even really go too much into the podcast that you two have, almost 30, which is you've impacted millions of lives. Like, it is an honor to have you here. You guys' impact is unbelievable. Sort of two things, I guess, real quick. One, could you share with people a little bit more about that? And then two, where's the best place for people to find more info on you if they want to get in touch and see what else you're up to?
Yeah, so almost 30, we started, 4 years ago when Lindsay and I were feeling really lost. We didn't
Yeah.
have our purpose, we didn't have our friendship yet, and we wanted people to feel less alone when they were evolving, when they were growing, when they were figuring out their 20s and eventually, all of life. So we started a podcast, just us, and then we brought on
Mhm.
guests and experts in the health, wellness, and spirituality space, for really deep, interesting conversations. We always try and keep it fun and light and interesting, but we're
Yeah.
a podcasting community all over the world.
And you can listen to Almost 30 anywhere you listen to podcasts, like Apple Podcasts, Spotify. And yeah, we engage with our community on Instagram, I guess the most.
Yeah.
That's Almost 30 podcast. Hopefully we'll make you laugh, inspire you, all the things
That's
on
great.
there. And then we have yeah, we hope to just support people in their evolution and really just support them in coming back to themselves. I
Yeah.
think, like, especially during your 20s, you can lose yourself, and it's totally normal, but we'd love to like walk you back. And
Yeah.
so we have courses and workbooks, and other, support pieces that could help you. So that's at shopalmost30.com.
Perfect. Okay. And then we will put all that in the show notes as well. And for the last question that I want to ask both of you, this is what we asked every single guest because we're all about finding direction on the podcast, but more importantly, through execution, right? Nothing happens if you just sit there and don't actually do anything. So what I would be curious is for both of you, what would be one thing that someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life? And to give you some time to think, this doesn't have to be like finding direction for the rest of your existence, but maybe even finding direction for the next month, 6 months, week, whatever it be.
I think for the next 24 hours, like this might be something that's in line with you, Lindsey, is like giving themselves permission to say what they feel. So just like do an experiment, just like for 24 hours, I'm going to say how I feel. If someone asks me, hey, where do you want to go for dinner? I'm not going to say, I don't know. I don't care. You're actually going to say what you want. And just seeing all the opportunities where you're kind of denying yourself the truth of what you feel.
Love it.
I would say notice, and I think because of social media, this might happen a decent amount.
Yeah.
But notice where you feel jealous, triggered, and just kind of like, just a certain way when you like come across someone's content or whatever it is. That's usually a really good reflective point. Anytime I'm feeling that way, I'm just like, okay, what about this person or what about how they're sharing is affecting me? And usually it's because I would love to be doing that more. Like, maybe they're being super real and honest and open, or maybe they are sharing their creativity in such a way that I'm like, damn, I want to be doing that more. It's usually a tell on something that you desire but haven't yet done or don't know how to do or are a little bit blocked in doing.
Got it. Awesome. Okay, well, those are both phenomenal. Everybody go do those, take the action items and execute on them. And other than that, it's been such an honor to have both of you here on the podcast. You're amazing souls. I just feel the love through all of you. And so thank you so much for being here. And, thank you again for joining us.